If you're buying food from the grocery store, there's a good chance that you are nutrient deficient. All right, stick around. I'm going to explain just why. Welcome back. My name is Zach, and today I'm your health coach. What we're going to go over today is why just about everybody, all right, the majority of the population, is nutrient deficient. But before we get into that, it's important, if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing, as well as hit that notification button so that you can find out every time that I post a new video. As we said before, a large portion of what this channel is going to be about is sourcing your food. But before we get into that, I have to recommend the book Eating on the Wild Side by Joe Robinson. Not only should this book be in your house, but it should be in your kitchen, and it should probably be taken with you every time you go grocery shopping. The author, Joe Robinson, did an incredible job at showing you basically the lineage, right? The past of almost every fruit and vegetable that we eat in the grocery store today, and how we have lost an incredible amount of phytonutrients, right? As she says, plant nutrients, from its past, from its wild ancestor to the food that you see in your grocery store today. What people tend to forget is that our fruits and vegetables, they don't actually come from the supermarket, right? That's just where they're sold. Nor do they come from your garden, right? That's just where they're grown, or the farm. Right? Where they actually come from is the wild. For example, the tomato comes from the Andes mountain range in South America. The wild ancestor of our carrots actually comes from Afghanistan. The first ever heirlooms such as garlic and scallions and shallots, well, they came from the mountains in Pakistan. Every fruit and vegetable that you see in the grocery store today has a story. Of how it started from its wild ancestor thousands of years ago, on how it made it to your dinner plate. One of the main points of Joe Robinson's book is to show you that over thousands of years of natural selection, of selective breeding, of genetic mutations that have occurred, the plants that you consume today, okay, are nowhere near as nutrient dense as their wild ancestors. So let's take a look at one example. The tomato. As we already said, the tomato comes from the Andes mountain range in South America. One look at these wild ancestors that still grow there today and they wouldn't even be recognizable. They are tiny and look like berries, which makes sense because tomatoes are technically a fruit, right? And they are actually within the berry family. Test results show that these wild ancestors have up to 40 times more lycopene, right? Which is a phytonutrient found in the red pigment, right, of the tomato, in comparison to, you know, the average day tomato that you see in grocery stores today. So how did these wild ancestors, right, end up on your plate today with 40 times less phytonutrients? Right around 2,000 years ago, the South American farmers began collecting the seeds up in the mountain ranges, planting them down in their, their hillside farms. Soon, these seeds and these tomatoes spread all over Central America, Mexico, the Galapagos Islands, but the seeds and the tomatoes really remained confined to the New World until about 1519. Then a Spanish conqueror, Hernan Cortez, sailed to the Yucatan Peninsula, where he began warring with the Mayans. While there, he began tasting some of the local food, some tomatoes, right? He described some of these tomatoes as so dry that it scratched the throat on the way down, yet others were sweeter. So he took the seeds of the sweetest tomatoes and he went back to Spain. And by the late 1600s, tomatoes had spread all over Europe. About 100 years later, okay, in the 1780s, Thomas Jefferson was introduced to the tomatoes. While serving as the U.S. Minister to France, he tasted these tomatoes, fell in love with them so much that he brought back, okay, only the sweetest kind, okay, back to Monticello. It took many years for the people of the United States to warm up to this new food, the tomato. And it wasn't until the 19th and 20th centuries until this really happened. And the reason why is because finally, because of, seed breeders, the tomato had a major makeover. The tomatoes at this time were hard-cored, hairy. Some of them had large open cavities like a pepper would have. And it was the goal of these seed breeders, right, to make them uniform and attractive. Famous seed breeder Alexander Hamilton spent 2 decades creating and breeding hundreds of new varieties before he finally kind of created the perfect tomato. He called it the Paragon. It was uniform and perfectly solid red. Finally, after years of breeding, US customers can finally expect a nice, shiny, thin-skinned red tomato. It took many years, however, to figure out, right, that this perfect tomato, right, this genetic mutation that occurred, came with some downsides, right? And one of them, or the major one, is a drastic decrease in its phytonutrient content. Today, almost every tomato contains this mutant gene. And not only has there been a serious loss of a phytonutrient content, of nutrient density, but there's also been a serious loss of flavor. By the 1900s and really the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, huge mega farms were able to harvest so much tomatoes with machines that it was really too much for the surrounding area. Now they needed to transport these and ship them miles away. And today, the majority of our tomatoes are grown in California or Florida, hundreds and hundreds of miles away. We clearly ran into issues trying to ship fresh tomatoes, right? It would be very easy for them to damage. So the tomato industry came up with a great idea to, harvest tomatoes at the very first sight of color, before they were ripe. And during the 2-week shipping process, by the time it actually reached the grocery store, by that time it would be red. Today this process still occurs, right? These tomatoes are harvested at their so-called, beaker stage, right? Their pre-ripe stage, and then however, today they're actually shipped to warehouses where they're forced ripened with precise amounts of ethylene gas. And clearly the consequences of this process, right, is a serious lack of flavor in the tomatoes. So much that if you buy, tomato products, one of the ingredients is probably going to be natural tomato flavoring. As you can see, there's a lot more that's going on to the fruits and vegetables that you see in your grocery store, right? And that the tomato, right, that the wild ancestor that has over 40 times more phytonutrients is not the same tomato that you're eating on your dinner plate, right? That there's been an extreme amount of natural selection, genetic mutations, breeding different tomatoes together to make the perfect tomato, right? That it has lost an extreme amount of phytonutrients over those 2,000 years. Now this is just one example, but you can see how almost every fruit and vegetable that's in your grocery store is gonna have some similar type of history to it, of how it starts with this wild ancestor that is full of nutrients, and then how over such a long period of time it is a different vegetable that's in the grocery store today. Now I'm not trying to tell you that you're just like, you're royally screwed, right? You're always going to be nutrient deficient, okay? But there are many things that you can do, okay, to kind of come close to those wild ancestors. It comes all from sourcing, right? Are you getting your tomatoes from California, or are you getting your tomatoes that were picked 2 days ago from the farmer's market? As well as storing and preparing, right? Are you eating that tomato within a day or two, or is it sitting in your the crisper drawer of your refrigerator for 2 weeks before you actually eat it? Now once again, I highly recommend the book Eating on the Wild Side by Jo Robinson. She does an incredible job at showing you how to source the food, how to store it, prepare it, cook it, everything that you could possibly do in order to get the most nutrient density, right, out of that fruit or vegetable. This channel is going to be, all about that, right? How to source the best food possible. But today was an important video because we have to first show you that not everything is as it seems, right? That fruit and vegetable that you're buying at the grocery store may not actually be that healthy for you, right? It might actually be kind of nutrient dead by the time it gets to your plate. If you like the video, please subscribe, share it with someone that you think will find it interesting. Let me know in the comments. Let me know what you thought, all right, how you source your food, and if you source your food from anywhere special. But that's all we have for today. Thanks so much, all right? Hopefully you're one step closer to learning how to thrive. Peace.